Hold on to your hats, folks. You're about to witness the most mind-blowing political debate ever. J.D. Vance and Timothy James Walz went toe-to-toe, making the Trump and Harris debate look like a total circus. These guys didn't just tick off the boxes on voter questions. They turned the whole thing into a masterclass of real dialogue, making you question if the other debates were even serious discussions. And get this, they actually reached a consensus on 10 different issues. I mean, 10. Have you noticed how people have become obsessed with using extreme language to scare off their opponents? Whether it's Trump, Harris, or Biden, it's everywhere. The crazy part? Most people have totally missed a key point. Campaign debates can and should be civilized and objective. Remember just a decade ago, presidential debates were all about finding the holes in each other's arguments and pointing out flawed viewpoints. If they stumbled into a consensus, awesome. But even when they didn't see eye to eye, it wasn't a complete meltdown. The goal was simple: convince the audience why your way was better, not tear down the other person's character. But in the recent debate, we actually got to witness a comeback of that golden era of campaigning.
In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Honestly, when J.D. Vance launched into that long-winded spiel, he basically waved the white flag. The Republican stance on abortion has always been about supporting and respecting life, which is supposed to be an emotional and heartfelt issue. But just listen to Vance. His response was as cold as ice, like he was reciting a textbook answer for an exam. Being overly rational just doesn't fit the moment. Now let's take a look at Timothy James Walz's answer to the same question for a real comparison.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
You can really feel the difference. Timothy James Walz doesn't just respect women's rights. He passionately encourages people to find affordable ways to raise kids while building families instead of casually opting for abortion. This message resonates powerfully with anyone who has a family, and it strikes a chord with most voters. What makes Tim truly stand out is how he centers the conversation around women's rights. The choice to start a family is completely up to them, and let's be honest, Tim's delivery is incredibly moving. Personally, I can feel the genuine emotion and sincerity in his words, which completely overshadows Vance's cool, overly rational approach. So, it's no surprise that Tim won this round of the debate. But don't blink, this is just the opening act. The real excitement is still ahead.
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion America where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late termination. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Notice how Vance keeps hammering on about babies and laws, yet he completely overlooks the one word that shouldn't be ignored: women. Seriously, how does that happen? Now it's time for Timothy James Walz to step in and show him how this conversation should really go down.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
All right, folks. Vance finally shows his true colors. He straight up admits he's clueless about the details of that tragic incident the host mentioned, then pivots to talk about red flag laws. Now, for those of you who might not be in the know, here's the scoop. A bunch of states in the US have rolled out red flag laws, which basically mean if you buy a gun legally, but your family, mental health pros, or law enforcement think you might be a danger to yourself or others, they can go to court and get your guns taken away. Sure, the law says it's a temporary hold for a year, but let's be real, everyone knows what that really means. It's like saying, we're taking your gun to stop you from doing something bad. That's some shady logic, right? So here's the $1 million question. Who decides if you're a threat to others? Picture this. I'm a hardcore Trump supporter, and let's say he doesn't win this election. I'm livid and start posting all sorts of extreme stuff on Facebook and X. Hey, we need to defend democracy. We have to take back our rights at any cost and get the right person in the presidency. Now, if some of my friends who don't agree with me and don't really like me report me, guess what happens? My hard-earned gun gets confiscated. But here's the kicker. If I really wanted to commit a crime, I could easily score a gun through illegal channels. So even if the court takes my registered firearm, it wouldn't change a thing. And that's Vance's main point. He's got a point. Most school shooters get their weapons illegally, so just taking guns away isn't the best fix for gun crime. Now, let's see how Tim responds to this issue.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents. And they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead. And they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out.
And honestly, it's not looking too convincing. Tim's response was packed with emotion. He was clearly trying to make us feel the heartbreak of the victims' families, urging for stricter gun control to protect our youth. But here's the thing, he totally misses the point about the Sandy Hook shooting. Those kids who committed that horrific crime got their guns from their own mom. So are we really talking about taking away guns from every household? In this debate, it's obvious that Vance came out on top. But then the next part really exposed the true hypocrisy of politicians. When Vance addressed the Springfield community incident, he delivered one of the most cringeworthy responses we've ever seen. As you might have noticed, Vance referred to Haitians as illegal immigrants. But that's not the case at all. These Haitians are still under temporary protected status. At least in the eyes of the Biden administration, they're legally here for now. But then Vance dropped a bombshell that lit up the entire debate stage. In 2023, the Department of Homeland Security revealed a jaw-dropping statistic. A staggering 95.8% of those eligible for legal asylum had downloaded the CBP One app. That includes nearly 260,000 individuals from countries like China, Russia, Venezuela, and Afghanistan who have secured legal asylum. But it wasn't just Vance who was in hot water. Tim was about to face some trouble too.
You said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17. Worked on family farms. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
What a load of nonsense. Politicians' hypocrisy really pops like a bubble at the slightest poke. After all that blabbering, they end up admitting the truth, don't they? The more they talk, the more they trip over their own words. By the end of this debate, mainstream media unanimously agreed that J.D. Vance was the clear winner. Sure, the results of the vice presidential debate might not shake things up too much, but it definitely boosts Trump's appeal in those key swing states. And guess who gets the credit? That's right, J.D. Vance. Honestly, he gives off more presidential vibes than the other three combined. What's your take on this? Drop your thoughts in the comments.